You reach a point in life where the quiet moments start speaking louder than the noise. The phone rings less, the days feel longer. And somewhere in between the creaks of your knees and the stillness of your mornings, you realize happiness isn't about more. Sometimes it's about less. After 65, you don't need more stuff, more noise, more drama, or more clutter. You need clarity, simplicity, and peace. But what most don't realize is that this peace often comes not from adding, but from removing. And once you remove these 7 hidden anchors, happiness doesn't creep in, it rushes in like sunlight through a broken cloud. The first thing you must remove is the burden of guilt. Guilt is that quiet thief that sits on your chest when you lie in bed at night. It whispers reminders of what you didn't do, what you should have done, how you failed someone, how you failed yourself. But here's the truth no one tells you. Guilt is only useful if it leads to change. And after that, it must go. If you've apologized, if you've made peace with the past, if you've done what you could, then guilt is just a weight you're voluntarily carrying. You are not meant to punish yourself forever for mistakes you made with the knowledge you had at the time. There is no wisdom in endless self-blame. Guilt kept too long turns to rust, and it eats you from the inside out. Let it go. Say the words out loud. I forgive myself, not because I'm perfect, but because I deserve peace, not tomorrow, today, because every minute you spend carrying guilt is a minute not spent in joy. The second thing to remove is toxic people. And that sounds harsh, doesn't it? But it's not about being unkind. It's about recognizing that you no longer owe your time, energy, or mental space to people who drain you, diminish you, or constantly leave you feeling less than. At 65, you've earned the right to curate your emotional environment the way a gardener prunes a tree deliberately, gently, but firmly. If someone's presence leaves you anxious, exhausted, or chronically misunderstood, it's okay to step back. You can love people from a distance. You can forgive them and still protect yourself. You are not responsible for everyone else's happiness. You are not required to fix every broken dynamic. What you are responsible for is your own emotional well-being. Letting go of toxic relationships isn't abandonment, it's self-respect. The third thing to remove is the fear of aging. It sneaks up on us, doesn't it? First a wrinkle, then a slower step, then forgetting a name here and there. And suddenly we start believing the lie that aging means decline, that life is fading, that the best is behind us. That fear becomes a shadow that follows us through the day. But here's the truth. Aging is not a disease. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not a failure. It's proof you've lived. Every line on your face, a map of your laughter and your pain. Every gray hair, a testament to the storms you've weathered and survived. You are not disappearing, you are evolving. You are becoming the elder your younger self needed. Do not let fear of aging rob you of the joy that's available right now. Remove that fear, and you'll find beauty in every creak of the floorboard, in every sunrise, in every conversation that matters. The fourth thing to remove is comparison, that silent, ruthless thief of joy. And social media doesn't help. It paints perfect lives in perfect lighting, but no one posts their sleepless nights, their doctor visits, their loneliness, their regrets. You are comparing your full life, scars and all, to someone else's highlight reel. That's like judging a book by reading only the title. Stop it. You've run your own race. You've climbed your own mountains. You've known love, loss, growth, and redemption. That's yours. It's sacred. No one else walks exactly in your shoes. Your story is not less worthy because it's different. Remove the urge to measure your worth by others' milestones. You are enough, not because you did what they did, but because you did what you could. The fifth thing to remove is clutter, not just the physical kind, but also mental and emotional clutter. Let's start with the physical. You know, the drawer, the one packed with things you haven't touched in 10 years, the garage that feels more like a museum of forgotten intentions than a functional space. All of it adds noise. All of it adds weight. And when you let go of it, donate it, give it away, toss it, you don't just clear space in your home, you clear space in your mind. The same goes for emotional clutter, old arguments, unfinished apologies, letters never sent. Let them go. Simplicity isn't just about having less, it's about feeling lighter. And the moment you choose peace over possessions, clarity over chaos, the air changes. You breathe easier, you think clearer, you move freer. The sixth thing to remove is the idea that it's too late. Too late to learn something new, too late to start over, too late to forgive, too late to love again. That's a lie whispered by a world obsessed with youth. But wisdom belongs to those who've lived, and that means you. It's not too late to take that trip, learn that language, write that book, start that side project, or simply become a more joyful version of yourself. The clock may be ticking, yes, but it's still ticking. That means you're still here. You still get to choose how the story ends. And sometimes the best chapters come after the halfway point. You are not done. You are not stuck. You are not too old to feel alive. And finally, the seventh thing to remove is the pressure to be everything to everyone. You are not a savior. You are not a solution. You are not a lifeline to every drowning soul in your orbit. Yes, you care deeply. Yes, you've been the rock, the shoulder, the giver. But even rocks erode. Even strong shoulders get tired. It's okay to rest. It's okay to say no. It's okay to put your joy first, because when you are full, truly full, you give from a place of overflow, not depletion. And people don't need your exhaustion. They need your presence, your wisdom, your calm. But you can't give what you don't have. So refill yourself and let go of the impossible standards that whisper, if you're not helping, you're failing. No, sometimes helping means being whole. When you remove these seven things, guilt, toxic people, fear of aging, comparison, clutter, the too late mindset, and the pressure to be everything, a strange thing happens. The silence becomes sweet. The days become softer. The laughter becomes real again. You start waking up with a sense of lightness, a kind of happiness that doesn't need big moments to feel complete. It's found in your morning tea, in a slow walk without urgency, in a conversation that isn't rushed. It's found in solitude without loneliness, in peace without perfection, in presence without pretense. And that happiness, it was never lost. It was only buried beneath the noise. Now that you've cleared the way, it can finally rise. Let it. You deserve it. And so when you start living with less of what weighs you down, you make room for more of what lifts you up. It's a strange truth in life. Sometimes we don't need to chase happiness. We just need to clear the clutter that's blocking it. The moment you begin removing those seven burdens, you start to notice tiny shifts. The world feels a bit softer. The air feels a bit lighter. Your chest opens up when you breathe, not because your circumstances changed overnight, but because you did. And that changes everything. Let's linger for a moment on the guilt, that first weight we mentioned, because so many seniors carry it like a heavy coat they've forgotten to take off. Guilt for not spending more time with their children when they were growing up. Guilt for saying the wrong thing. Guilt for not visiting someone before they passed. Guilt for the dreams they let go of. But here's the truth that breaks through the fog. Regret is not a debt. It is a lesson, and once you've learned the lesson, you're free to release the burden. Carrying regret doesn't honor the people you miss, and it doesn't change the past. It only prevents you from being present right now when you need your full heart available for the time you still have. So instead of replaying those moments with a heart full of shame, you replay them with a spirit of compassion. You were doing the best you could with what you knew, and now you know more. Now you love deeper. Now you show up more present. That's growth. And growth is worth more than perfection ever was. Then there's the matter of toxic people. Some are family, some are friends, some are people you've known for decades. But time does not mean obligation. Just because you've known someone for 30 years doesn't mean you have to keep inviting their chaos into your life for a 31st. You don't need to cut ties in anger. You don't even have to confront them. Sometimes peace is quiet. Sometimes it's just not returning the call or slowly shifting your energy away. Protecting your peace isn't rude, it's responsible, because if your peace falls apart, so does your joy, your health, your clarity. And after 65, those are no longer luxuries. They're essential. And aging, what a double-edged sword that has become. For some, it's a badge of honor. For others, it feels like a thief in the night. But if you shift your lens, if you see age as not decay, but deepening, everything changes. You realize that age gives you permission to finally live unapologetically, to stop explaining yourself, to stop proving yourself. You are not here to impress anymore. You are here to enjoy. That's a radical shift. You no longer need to dress a certain way or act a certain way or meet some invisible standard of being young. You just need to be you, fully, gently, proudly. You are not fading, you are arriving. When comparison gets removed, you begin to see your own story as worthy. Suddenly, your small home becomes enough. Your slow mornings become sacred. Your face in the mirror becomes beautiful, not because it's wrinkle-free, but because it's full of history. You've cried tears of grief and joy in that skin. You've smiled at grandbabies. You've held trembling hands during hard times. You've laughed so hard you couldn't breathe. That's not a life to compare. That's a life to honor. There's no need to wish for someone else's story when you realize how sacred your own has been. And oh, the power of removing clutter. When you begin to release items that once defined your identity, you realize that identity has nothing to do with what sits on a shelf. You are not your antiques, your piles of books, your saved receipts, or your faded holiday decorations. You are not what you've stored. You are what you've lived. And when your space begins to open up, so does your heart. There's something freeing about walking into a room that breathes with you instead of suffocating with decades of things you no longer need. You don't lose yourself when you let go of the old sweaters or the broken furniture or the boxes of forgotten intentions. You'll find yourself again in the empty space, in the stillness, in the clarity of a simplified life. And the too late mindset, let me speak directly to that. Too late for what? For joy, for growth, for healing? Nonsense. A woman once began painting at age 72. By 82, her art was hanging in galleries. A man learned to dance at 67. By 70, he was teaching his local community center. These aren't exceptions, they're reminders. The moment you give yourself permission to try, you defy the rules you thought were written in stone. You've spent decades carrying others. You've earned the right to carry a dream again, to try that class, to pick up that instrument, to speak a new language, not fluently, but joyfully. Your best years are not defined by speed or youth. They are defined by aliveness. And aliveness doesn't care how old you are. It only cares if your soul is awake. And when you finally remove the pressure to be everything to everyone, you step into something sacred. You begin to choose presence over performance. You begin to answer softly instead of urgently. You stop fixing what's not yours to fix. And slowly the weight slides off your shoulders. You find moments of stillness where once there was only obligation. You sit by the window without guilt. You sip your tea slowly. You notice the color of the sky. And in those quiet moments, the real you reemerges, the version that doesn't need to save anyone or prove anything or explain why you need rest, the version that's just being. And that, my friend, is freedom. Now imagine waking up and your home is peaceful, not because nothing went wrong, but because you no longer react with the same stress. Imagine walking through your day and not worrying about what people think of you, not rehashing old conversations, not rushing to say yes when your body is whispering no. You feel steady, you feel rooted, you feel light, because you've made space for peace to grow. Spend more time outside. You begin to notice things you overlooked for years. The way your neighbor's tree blooms differently each season, the song of a bird you never knew lived nearby, the way your body still moves when you dance a little in the kitchen. These things become enough, more than enough. They become joy. Reconnect with old friends, not the ones who drained you, but the ones who feel like home, the ones who laugh with you without needing small talk, the ones who let you be quiet. And if you don't have those friends yet, you make them, because it's not too late. You join a group, you say hello at the cafe, you open yourself not with desperation, but with invitation. And suddenly you're not alone. You're surrounded, not with a crowd, but with connection. You start to enjoy your own company. You remember things you used to love, the hobbies, the crafts, the books, the stories. You bring them back, not to be productive, but to feel alive. You write letters. You walk slower. You cry when you need to. You laugh more often, even if no one else is in the room. You forgive. Oh, how powerful this is. You forgive people who never said sorry. You forgive moments that bruised your spirit. You even forgive life itself for the ways it didn't go according to your plan. And in that forgiveness, you make peace, not with what happened, but with yourself. You realize you don't have to carry every scar like a wound. Some scars are medals. They mean you lived, you survived, you grew. And now you heal. You also begin to celebrate the small things more. A good night's sleep, a walk without pain, a conversation with a grandchild, a meal that brings back memories. These things, once taken for granted, now feel like miracles because they are. Your evenings change. They are quieter, more intentional. Maybe you light a candle. Maybe you listen to music from your youth. Maybe you look out the window and watch the stars come out. You no longer fear the night. It feels like a friend now. And in that stillness, you whisper a thank you, not for perfection, but for presence. You begin to live not just longer, but deeper. Every day becomes a blessing, not because it's easy, but because you've made it meaningful. Not because you have everything, but because you let go of what you didn't need. And somewhere along the way, someone notices. Maybe it's your neighbor, maybe your child, maybe a stranger. They see the peace in your eyes, the calm in your voice, the lightness in your step, and they ask you, how did you get here? And you'll smile because you'll know. You removed the weight. You stopped chasing. You started being, and you realized that happiness was never about having more. It was about needing less and loving what remained. You begin to notice that peace doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it shows up in the ordinary, a warm cup of coffee enjoyed in silence, a chair that fits your back just right, a soft breeze through the window as you sit and listen to nothing. These moments, once dismissed as mundane, now become sacred. They are no longer just filler in the day, they are the day. You start to understand that happiness doesn't come charging into your life like a parade. It sneaks in quietly, almost shyly, when you clear away the noise that used to drown it out. The seventh thing you removed, your fear of change, becomes the most powerful shift of all. For years, perhaps decades, you were conditioned to believe that change was a threat, that stability was safety, that the routines, the habits, the predictable schedules were what kept life together. But the truth is, change is the pulse of life. Without it, you become stagnant, stuck, numb. When you begin to welcome change, gentle, natural, human change, you begin to feel alive again. You open the curtains, you try something new, you sit in a different seat, you cook a different meal. Small shifts, but they stir the waters, they let light in. You realize change doesn't have to be violent or painful. It can be soft, it can be chosen, and with every change, you embrace a new version of you is born, not younger, not older, but freer. You start waking up not with dread, but with curiosity. What might today offer? Who might you speak to? What will the sky look like? These may seem like small questions, but they're signs of aliveness. And after 65, that's a treasure. You're not looking to conquer the world anymore. You're looking to experience it, to feel it fully, to soak in what you once rushed past. The first sip of water in the morning, the way your toes curl when you stretch, the smile of the shopkeeper you see once a week, the softness of your blanket, the sound of your own voice humming a tune you didn't realize you remembered. These are the real riches of life. And there's something else. Your relationship with your body begins to change. You stop looking at it with disappointment or criticism. You start thanking it. You thank your legs for still carrying you, however slowly. You thank your hands for everything they've held. You thank your eyes for all they've seen. You even thank your aches. They remind you that you're here, still feeling, still moving. You stop trying to reverse the clock. You realize the goal is not to erase the years, but to honor them. Every wrinkle is a laugh line. a worry line, a story. Every scar is proof that healing happened. You wear your years like a tapestry, and you do so without shame. You start telling your stories more often. At first, you wonder if anyone cares, but then you realize your stories are seeds. Every time you tell a story, you plant wisdom. A young person listens and hears something new. A friend laughs and remembers something they'd forgotten. Even when you speak to yourself, aloud or silently, your stories remind you of who you are. Not just where you've been, but how far you've come. You remember the resilience it took to survive the hard years, the courage it took to begin again, the love you've given even when it wasn't returned. And you sit with all of that, not with sadness, but with reverence. You stop chasing closure. You learn to live with unanswered questions. You realize that not everything needs to be fixed, wrapped up, resolved. Some endings are open. Some stories just pause. You make peace with uncertainty, and that gives you rest. You begin to trust that life will continue to unfold and that you don't need to control every detail. You release your grip, and with that release comes grace. You also begin to see that happiness is not always loud. It's not always laughter or excitement. Sometimes it's stillness. Sometimes it's a gentle sense of rightness that settles in your chest, a soft smile you give yourself when no one's watching, a sigh of relief when you realize you don't need to rush anymore. You're no longer trying to build a future. You're simply living today. That shift away from striving toward being unlocks a kind of peace that money can't buy and youth can't promise. You begin letting others help you, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. You accept kindness. You receive care. You let people open jars, carry bags, or offer an arm when the sidewalk feels uneven. You no longer measure your worth by how independent you appear. You understand that connection is mutual and letting others support you is a gift to them too. You give them a chance to love you. You model strength that doesn't shout. You show them that dignity is not in doing everything alone. It's in knowing when to lean, when to rest, when to simply allow life to hold you for a moment. Your priorities shift. The things that once felt urgent no longer pull at you. You start choosing people over tasks, presence over perfection. You leave the dishes in the sink if it means finishing a conversation. You ignore the email if it means watching the sunset. You begin measuring time not by what you accomplished, but by how deeply you felt. Was there love today? Was there laughter? Was there peace, even for a moment? Those are the new metrics. And by those standards, you are wealthy beyond measure. You realize you don't need to be useful in the way the world once defined it. You don't need a job title or productivity goals. Your wisdom is useful. Your presence is useful. Your listening ear, your gentle advice, your quiet smile. These things carry more value than you know. You are not past your prime. You are in a new season. And this season bears fruit that only time can grow. Kindness, perspective, gratitude, depth, patience. These are your harvest. Now, you also begin to practice more compassion toward your younger self. Instead of scolding yourself for mistakes, you begin to see that younger version of you as someone who needed love, not judgment. You look back at your past not with regret, but with tenderness. You begin to understand why you made certain choices. You forgive the things you couldn't see back then. And in that forgiveness, a kind of healing occurs that no doctor can prescribe. You begin to integrate all the versions of you, the child, the dreamer, the parent, the caregiver, the worker, the wanderer, into one whole being. And you love them all. You become more gentle in your language, not just with others, but with yourself. You no longer call yourself stupid for forgetting something. You no longer call your body ugly for aging. You speak to yourself as you would speak to a dear friend. You say things like, it's okay, and you did your best, and I'm proud of you. These are not small things. These are life-giving things. You learn to be your own safe place, and when you do, everything changes. You realize you don't have to chase the big milestones anymore. The weddings, the promotions, the house purchases. You've had them or you haven't. But either way, you no longer measure your joy by them. You measure it in quiet evenings, in the sound of rain, in the way your heart feels after a phone call with someone who truly sees you, in the way your shoulders relax when you stop pretending to be strong all the time. You measure it by peace. And peace, you realize, is the most radical kind of happiness there is. You begin to bless things, not in a religious way necessarily, but in a spiritual one. You bless your food before eating. You bless the road before walking. You bless the day before living it. You bless the night before sleeping. You offer gratitude, not just with your words, but with your whole presence. You move through life with more reverence, with more awe, and even the ordinary begins to shine with meaning. And eventually you begin to understand that your very existence is a kind of medicine, that someone out there is watching how you live now and being inspired by it. They see how you navigate loss with grace, how you laugh even when your body aches, how you find joy in simple things, how you've let go of bitterness, and they are learning from you. Without knowing it, you've become a teacher of peace, poet mentor, a lighthouse, and that legacy will echo far beyond your lifetime. And then comes the moment when you realize you've already been living a kind of happiness you didn't even have words for before. It wasn't the kind that made headlines or created fireworks. It was the kind that whispered gently through your life like a soft wind. You didn't always notice it, but now, with the clutter gone, with the weight of expectations and self-judgment lifted, you see it everywhere. It was in the quiet forgiveness you gave someone who never apologized. It was in the decision to smile anyway, even when the day felt heavy. It was in how you let someone else go first in line without needing to be thanked. That was happiness. And you were carrying it all along. You start to understand that this life, your life, was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be real, raw, full of contradictions. You can feel sorrow and still be grateful. You can grieve and still grow. You can age and still be radiant. And when you finally accept that wholeness includes both the light and the shadow, you stop fighting so hard against the natural tides. You let yourself be human. And that acceptance, the full embrace of who you are, not in spite of your flaws, but with them, is the ultimate liberation. You start noticing people differently too. You see behind their eyes, past their masks. You understand that the loud neighbor is probably lonely, that the rude stranger at the store may be battling something invisible, that the slow driver might be someone's fragile grandfather. Your heart opens, you give more grace, you rush less to judge, because you've lived long enough to know that life humbles everyone eventually, and sometimes kindness is the only answer that matters. You begin laughing more, not because life is easier, but because you've stopped needing everything to be in your control. You find humor in your forgetfulness, joy in your imperfections. You laugh when you spill something, when you misplace your keys, when your joints crack like popcorn. You laugh not with sarcasm, but with softness, with love. You realize laughter is a kind of prayer. It says, I'm still here. And there's a beauty in that resilience, a song in your spirit that plays even when the world feels silent. You find yourself reaching out more. You send that message, you make that call, you write the note, not because you need something, but because connection itself has become sacred. You no longer wait for the perfect words, you speak from the heart. You say things like, I miss you, or I'm proud of you, or I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. You say it without needing a reply, because your heart has learned that giving love is its own reward. You begin to reclaim your time. You say no without guilt. You stop attending events that drain you. You stop pretending to enjoy conversations that leave you feeling empty. You no longer perform your presence. You offer it where it is wanted, where it is honored, and where it is not, you gently walk away. You stop wasting your energy trying to convince others of your worth. You know who you are. And the peace that comes from that certainty is like a gentle fire that keeps you warm through every season. You start revisiting dreams that you once shelved, not to fulfill them in the same way you once imagined, but to breathe life into them in new, wiser forms. Maybe you never became a painter, but you pick up a brush now. Maybe you never traveled the world, but you read stories that transport you. Maybe you never wrote that book, but you start journaling just for you. You realize dreams aren't only about achieving, they're about expressing, about honoring the spark that still flickers in you even after all these years. You begin seeing aging not as a decline, but as an ascension. Each year adds not just wrinkles, but perspective. Each challenge adds not just pain, but power. You are not fading, you are distilling, becoming purer, clearer, wiser. And though your body may be slowing, your spirit is expanding. You feel it in how you respond more gently, in how you listen more fully, in how you look at the world with a softness that only comes from having lived through both storms and still waters. And in the middle of all this, you realize you're no longer afraid of quiet. The silence that once felt so loud and unbearable now feels like a friend. In the silence, you meet yourself. In the silence, you listen to your inner knowing, the voice that had been drowned out by noise for so long. That voice doesn't scream, it speaks in whispers. But what it says is steady and true. You are enough. You always have been. You begin living slower but deeper. You no longer try to cram 5 things into a day. You do one thing with full attention: a walk, a meal, a conversation. And in doing so, that one thing becomes sacred. Time stretches when you're present. And you begin to see that the greatest luxury in life was never wealth, it was presence. The ability to be fully in one moment, to taste your food, to really see the color of the sky, to look someone in the eyes and listen without preparing your reply. These are the riches no one can take from you. You begin giving your presence like a gift. You hold space for others. You become the person people feel safe around. You ask deeper questions, not just how are you, but how is your heart? You stop offering quick advice and start offering your ears. Your stillness becomes an anchor for others, not because you have all the answers, but because you've learned that being with someone in their mess is more healing than trying to fix them. You start letting go of what didn't go the way you hoped, the missed opportunities, the people who left, the things you never got to say. You stop holding on to those things like wounds. You begin holding them like lessons. You learn to say, that shaped me instead of that broke me. You shift from blame to understanding. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what did this teach me? And that shift opens the door to a freedom that bitterness could never provide. You stop comparing, you stop measuring your life against the highlight reels of others. You realize that nobody's life is without pain, no matter how perfect it looks. You understand that everyone carries their own weight, and so you bless others in their joy without resenting it. You celebrate without feeling lesser, because you know that your journey is your own. You are not late, you are not behind. You are exactly where your soul needs to be to keep learning, expanding, softening, and awakening. You begin to embrace solitude not as loneliness, but as sanctuary. You enjoy your own company. You take yourself out for coffee or sit by the window and let the light warm your face. You discover that being alone is not the same as being empty. In fact, some of your most full moments happen in the quiet, when no one else is around, when you feel your own heart beating and know you are enough company for yourself. You forgive more freely, not because others always deserve it, but because you deserve peace. You learn that forgiveness is not about condoning what hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of that hurt. It's about choosing to stop bleeding from wounds that others may never admit they caused. You release the anger, not to forget, but to move forward without carrying that poison inside you. And when you do, you feel lighter, not naive, just wise enough to know that peace is a better companion than vengeance. And slowly, you begin to feel whole, not in a way that means you're finished growing, but in a way that means you're no longer at war with yourself. You hold all your parts, the scared parts, the joyful parts, the messy parts, with tenderness. You stop needing to explain yourself. You stop needing to prove anything. You just are. And that finally is enough. You sit at the end of each day and ask, did I live today with intention? Did I offer love? Did I rest when I needed to? Did I show up for my own life? And most nights you find that the answer is yes. Even if you didn't do everything right, you were present, you were real, you were honest, and that is more than enough. And one day someone sits beside you and says, you seem so at peace. What's your secret? And you smile. Not because you have a perfect answer, but because you know the truth can't be summarized. It can only be lived. You smile and say, I let go of what I didn't need anymore. And I learned to love what was already here. And in that simple sentence, the years, the pain, the joy, the growth, they all shine. And so the journey continues, not forward into some grand destination, but deeper into the heart of what it means to live. You no longer measure your days in tasks completed, but in moments that moved you, a gentle breeze across your cheek, the way a bird lands so lightly on a branch, the sound of laughter from a grandchild in the other room. These become your treasures, and you begin to see that a full life isn't made from big events, but from an accumulation of small sacred pauses. You start noticing how much of life you once rushed through, how many smiles you missed because your mind was already 10 steps ahead, how many meals you barely tasted, how many hugs you half received thinking about something else. But now you know better. You know that every moment, even the ordinary ones, are opportunities to be fully alive. You linger longer, you sip slower. You listen not just with your ears, but with your whole being. You treat time not as something to conquer, but as something to savor. You stop trying to be everything to everyone. You stop overpromising, overcommitting, overextending. You've realized that saying yes to everything is often just a way to avoid disappointing others while quietly betraying yourself. So now you choose your yes with care. You choose your no with love. You prioritize peace over approval, and the world doesn't fall apart like you feared. In fact, it starts falling into place. People respect your boundaries, and the ones who don't, you learn to let them go without guilt. You realize the value of energy, not the kind you once used to run marathons or juggle 100 tasks, but the subtle, precious energy of attention, intention, and emotional presence. You learn to conserve it, to invest it wisely. You no longer give it away to gossip, drama, or resentment. You protect your spirit. You make space in your life for what feeds you, not what drains you. And this shift isn't loud. It's not dramatic, but it is powerful. It changes the entire atmosphere of your inner world. You begin tending to your inner life like a garden. You pull the weeds of comparison, bitterness, and fear. You plant seeds of gratitude, compassion, and curiosity. You water them with patience, and slowly, beautifully, things bloom. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to remind you that growth never ends. No matter your age, you are still becoming, still blossoming, still unfolding, and there's deep joy in that. You come to understand that happiness is not a finish line, but a rhythm. It's not something you achieve once and then hold forever. It's something you dance with, moment by moment. And some days it's close, some days it slips away, but you don't panic anymore when it fades. You know it will return just like the tide. And in the meantime, you trust in the quiet goodness of simply being here, breathing, witnessing, living. You start giving away more than you ever thought you could. Not just material things, but wisdom, attention, encouragement. You find that the more you give, the more full you feel. You become a wellspring, not because you have everything figured out, but because you've learned that being generous doesn't require perfection, only presence. You offer your hand to those stumbling behind you, not to pull them to your level, but to walk beside them because you remember how it felt to be lost and you know how much it matters to be seen. You notice beauty in places you once ignored. The wrinkles on your hands tell stories. The crack in your favorite mug becomes endearing. The faded photograph on your shelf feels like a living memory. You no longer seek perfection, you seek meaning, and meaning shows up in the worn, the weathered, the real. You no longer discard what is broken, you honor it. You mend what you can, and what you can't, you bless. Because not everything needs fixing, some things just need acceptance. You rediscover the magic of rest, not just sleep, but soul deep rest. The kind that comes when you stop striving, When you stop trying to earn your right to be here, when you stop measuring your worth by what you do and begin to honor it simply because you are. You lie down in the middle of the afternoon and feel no shame. You take walks without a destination. You sit in silence and let your body breathe, and you realize this too is living. This too is sacred. You begin making peace with your past. You stop wishing you could go back and do it differently. You stop replaying the same regrets. You understand now that even your mistakes were teachers, that even your missteps were part of the choreography that brought you to this moment. And this moment right now is full of possibility, full of grace. So you stop fighting with your younger self. You start holding them gently. You say, "You did the best you could. Thank you for getting me here." And in that forgiveness, you become whole. You start valuing simplicity. You find joy in the mundane. Folding clothes becomes meditation. Washing dishes becomes a moment of gratitude. The scent of coffee in the morning becomes a prayer. You no longer need extravagance to feel joy. You realize that simplicity is not lack, it is clarity. And clarity brings peace. You let go of the need to impress. You let go of the chase. You are no longer trying to keep up. You are creating your own pace. And in that gentle rhythm, happiness quietly finds you. You stop needing to win every argument. You let people be wrong sometimes, not because you're weak, but because you no longer need to be right to feel whole. You value peace over pride. You know that convincing someone rarely changes them, but your example might. So you live your truth without the need to defend it. You walk in your values, not to prove anything, but because they feel like home. And in doing so, you become a light, not blinding, just steady. A lighthouse for others finding their way. You begin to detach from outcomes. You still care, you still try, but you release the tight grip of control. You understand that things don't always unfold the way you planned, and that's okay. Sometimes the detour is the path. Sometimes the closed door is protection. You stop tying your peace to results. You tie it to your effort, your alignment, your integrity. And that shift, that's freedom. You start living for today, not because tomorrow doesn't matter, but because today is the only thing you can truly hold. You find joy in the now, in the chair you're sitting on, the breath you're taking, the words you're hearing. You begin seeing today not as a stepping stone to something better, but as something sacred in itself. You stop waiting for someday. You start living for this day. You look around and realize your definition of wealth has changed. It's no longer what's in your bank account. It's what's in your spirit. It's the quality of your friendships, the warmth in your home, the peace in your heart. You realize you're rich when you can sit in stillness and feel content, when you can walk in nature and feel awe, when you can give without fear and receive without shame. That is wealth, and you have it. You stop postponing your joy. You don't wait for the perfect weight or the perfect timing or the perfect conditions. You wear the dress. You eat the dessert. You dance in the kitchen. You call your friend. You write the poem. You sing the song. Because you finally understand that joy is not a reward, it's a companion, a lifeline, a necessity. And you are worthy of it now. You begin seeing yourself through gentler eyes. You catch your reflection and smile. Not because you look like a magazine cover, but because you see someone who has lived and loved and tried. You see courage in your posture, wisdom in your gaze. You see a survivor, a learner, a soul who has shown up day after day, even when it was hard. And you begin to admire that person. You begin to love that person. You begin to love that person. And so you wake up one morning not to chase happiness, but to dwell in it. You sip your tea slowly. You step into the sun. You stretch your arms and breathe deeply. You whisper a thank you to the day. And in that whisper is a lifetime of lessons, a lifetime of letting go, a lifetime of becoming. And most of all, a quiet, grounded joy that has nothing to prove and everything to give. You begin to notice that the world hasn't changed. It's still fast, chaotic, uncertain, but you have changed. You don't need the world to slow down for you to feel calm. You've built calm inside. You don't need the noise to stop for you to find peace. You've cultivated silence in your own heart. You've realized that peace isn't out there waiting to be earned. It's something you uncover when you finally put down everything that isn't yours to carry. You look back and remember all the times you thought you wouldn't make it, all the nights you lay awake, worried about how things would work out. And yet here you are, older, wiser, still standing. You've survived every storm, and with every one, you've gained something. Not always clarity, not always comfort, but strength. And with that strength comes grace, the grace to be kind to yourself, the grace to forgive what you didn't know, the grace to move forward without needing all the answers. You start focusing more on who you are becoming rather than what you are achieving. You measure your days not by how much you've done, but by how honestly you've lived. Were you kind today? Were you present? Did you listen with your whole heart? Did you love with your whole being? These are the new milestones, and they don't come with trophies, but they come with peace. And that's worth more than gold. You notice that fear still visits you from time to time. The fear of change, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of not having enough time left. But you stop letting it drive the car. You invite it in, offer it tea, listen to its concerns, and then you let it go. You no longer try to silence fear by force. You let courage speak louder. And courage doesn't shout, it whispers. You're still here. Keep going. You begin to redefine purpose. You realize that it's not something grand or impressive. It's often small, quiet, and deeply rooted in the ordinary. Purpose is holding your grandchild's hand. It's baking bread for your neighbor. It's writing a note to someone who feels alone. It's waking up and deciding to be fully alive, even when it hurts. You no longer need to chase purpose. It finds you when you choose love in the smallest of ways. You let go of the need to be understood by everyone, not because you've given up, but because you've grown up. You understand that some people will never see your heart clearly, and that's okay. You don't need everyone to approve of your path. You just need to walk it with integrity. You've stopped explaining your peace to those who thrive on chaos. You've stopped apologizing for your healing. You've started honoring your soul's quiet wisdom above the world's loud opinion. You become more protective of your space, not out of fear, but out of deep respect for your own energy. You no longer welcome people who leave you empty. You no longer engage in conversations that make your spirit feel small. You realize your energy is sacred, and where you spend it is your vote for the life you want. So you light a candle, not a fire. You choose warmth over heat. You create sanctuary over spectacle. And slowly, the people who are meant for you find their way to your quiet corner. You begin to live with an open heart but guarded gates. You love freely, but you no longer tolerate emotional trespassing. You recognize manipulation disguised as charm. You see through the false urgency of guilt and obligation. You learn to say, that doesn't work for me, without needing to justify it. And in doing so, you create space for true connection, for honest joy, for unburdened love. You understand now that healing isn't a destination, it's a cycle. Some days you feel whole, other days old wounds ache, and both are part of the journey. You stop judging your growth by how often you feel good. You begin to measure it by how gently you respond to yourself when you don't. You no longer demand perfection from your process, you offer compassion instead. And that shift, that quiet self-acceptance, is the truest sign of healing. You stop waiting for permission to be happy. You stop looking for someone to rescue you from the dullness of routine. You start lighting candles during dinner, even when you eat alone. You play your favorite songs while folding laundry. You wear the good clothes on a Wednesday afternoon. You find reasons to celebrate the ordinary, because happiness, you've learned, is not a prize for doing life right. It's a practice, one you choose again and again. You begin to cherish solitude, not as loneliness, but as deep companionship with yourself. You walk without your phone. You sit without distraction. You listen to your own thoughts and no longer run from them. You become your own confidant, your own comfort, your own home. And in doing so, you realize you've never really been alone. You've just never been fully with yourself until now. You forgive people who never apologized, not for them, but for you. You release the burden of carrying their unhealed actions in your spirit. You stop waiting for them to get it. You get it. You understand that their choices were reflections of their wounds, not your worth. You set yourself free not because they deserve it, but because you do. And in that release, your heart becomes light again, capable of flying. You begin to prioritize your body, not out of vanity, but out of reverence. You walk because it feels good. You stretch because your muscles thank you. You eat food that nourishes you. You rest without guilt. You stop punishing your body for aging. You start thanking it for carrying you this far, for healing even when you didn't treat it well, for staying even when you were ready to give up. You treat your body like a friend because it is. You notice your pace slowing and you welcome it. You no longer rush through meals, conversations, or emotions. You let things take the time they need. You give yourself permission to pause. And in that slowness, you find richness. You taste more, feel more, understand more. Life no longer feels like something you're speeding through. It feels like something you're dancing with. You speak less, but with more depth. You no longer fill silences with noise. You let them be. You listen more than you speak. And when you do speak, your words carry weight, not because you've rehearsed them, but because they come from truth. You understand now that wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to simply hold space. You start laughing more, deep belly laughs, quiet chuckles, joyful sighs. You laugh at the absurdity of life, at the beauty of small surprises, at your own past seriousness. You allow humor to crack open the heaviness. You let joy be medicine. And even in sorrow, you find moments of lightness, not to dismiss the pain, but to remember that joy is resilient even when grief sits beside it. You stop needing to prove your value. You no longer seek applause to feel enough. You carry your worth like a quiet crown, not flashy, but undeniable. You don't beg to be seen. You simply stand in your light. And those meant to see you, they do, without effort, without explanation, without performance. You begin to live in rhythm with nature. You wake with the sun. You rest with the moon. You let seasons teach you. You allow yourself to bloom, to rest, to shed, to begin again. You stop fighting winter. You honor it as preparation. You stop chasing endless summer. You learn to trust the cycle. And in doing so, you make peace with your own seasons of life. You notice how little you truly need. A few good friends, a body that moves, a soft place to land, a purpose that feels honest. The noise of want quiets, the ache for more fades, contentment takes root. And you understand now happiness isn't a place you arrive, it's a way you move through life, open handed, lighthearted, and deeply awake. You begin to understand that life was never about perfection, it was about presence, not about being flawless, but about being real, not about always being strong, but about being honest, not about winning, but about loving. And you, in all your imperfections, have done something extraordinary. You've kept going, you've kept learning, you've kept softening, and that is the most beautiful thing of all. And as the days stretch on, the world around you becomes more like a mirror, not the kind that reflects your face or your flaws, but the kind that reflects your choices, the way you speak to others, the way you carry yourself through sorrow, the way you show up even when no one is watching. It reflects your integrity, your gentleness, your steady, quiet resolve to live in truth, even when it would be easier not to. You begin to truly grasp the weight and gift of time. You stop wishing it away. You stop regretting what's behind you and fearing what lies ahead. Instead, you settle into the moment you're in. You notice the taste of your coffee, the sound of the birds outside your window, the way sunlight rests on your skin like a quiet blessing. These moments are no longer filler. They are the main event. They are where life actually happens, and you've learned to finally be there for it. You think back to who you were at 25, 30, 40, how much you didn't know then, how fast you were running, how much noise you let in. You don't judge that version of you. You honor them. They got you here. They did the best they could with what they knew, but now you know more. Now you know that peace is more valuable than praise, that love is more meaningful than recognition, that presence is more nourishing than productivity. And so you live differently. You take fewer pictures and hold more moments in your mind. Not everything needs to be captured, not every beauty needs to be posted. Some things are just for you, for your heart to remember, for your spirit to carry. You've learned that some of the most profound memories are quiet ones. The way someone looked at you when they thought you weren't paying attention, the feeling of wind across your face as you stood still, the sound of someone's laughter that reminded you what joy feels like deep in your chest. You stop needing a reason to be kind. Kindness becomes your default, not because the world has always been kind to you, but because you realize you have the power to choose your response. You become the kind of person who returns a stranger's smile, who holds the door, who remembers names, who checks in without being asked, not for credit, not for show, but because it feels right. Because you know what it's like to feel invisible, and you've made it your quiet mission to make sure others don't feel that way around you. You begin to travel lighter, both physically and emotionally. You clear out closets, not just the ones with clothes, but the ones in your heart filled with resentment, fear, old stories that no longer serve you. You say goodbye to people who couldn't love you well. You release habits that kept you small. You stop carrying burdens that aren't yours. You make peace with the idea that letting go doesn't mean failure, it means freedom. You learn that happiness is not something you demand from life, it's something you build with your choices. You become more aware of how you spend your time, who you spend it with, what you let into your space. You start saying no, not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of clarity. You know what matters now. You know what nurtures you and what drains you. And that awareness becomes your compass. You laugh at your younger self, not in mockery, but with love. How tightly you held things, how often you rushed, how much you worried about things that never even happened. You smile because you've made it to this point, not unscarred, but unbroken. You've learned that scars are not shameful. They are proof that healing is possible, that life continues, that beauty can bloom from broken places. You learn the sacred art of doing nothing. You sit on a bench with no agenda. You take a walk without counting steps. You allow yourself to be unproductive. And in that space, you discover you are more than your usefulness. You are a being, not just a doing. And being, truly being, is enough. You let yourself feel again, not just the safe emotions, but the hard ones, the grief you bury, the anger you swallowed, the disappointment you never voiced. You create space for all of it without shame. You realize that your heart has always been trying to speak to you. It just needed quiet enough to be heard. And in listening, you become more whole. You find comfort in routines, not because they limit you, but because they ground you. The morning tea, the evening walk, the weekly call with a loved one. These are not small things, they are anchors. They are rituals of care, ways of saying to yourself, I am worth showing up for. Again and again. You redefine success. It's no longer about accumulation, it's about alignment. You ask yourself, does this align with my values, my peace, my purpose? If it doesn't, you walk away. Even if it glitters, even if everyone else is chasing it, you no longer follow the crowd, you follow your heart. You begin to see aging not as decline, but as deepening. Your laugh lines become evidence of joy. Your gray hair becomes a crown of wisdom. Your slower pace becomes a form of mindfulness. You no longer mourn what you've lost, you celebrate what you've gained. Perspective, resilience, clarity. And in that celebration, you find a richness that youth alone could never provide. You become more grateful, not in a forced performative way, but in a genuine, breath catching way. You thank your legs for walking you through decades. You thank your eyes for all they've seen. You thank your heart for still being open despite all the reasons it had to close. You become aware of life's fragility, and that awareness sharpens your appreciation for every breath, every connection, every chance to try again. You tell people you love them more often. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You don't assume they already know. You say it, write it, show it. Because you've learned that love is too precious to leave unspoken. You understand now that expressing love is not weakness, it's courage. You become more curious, less certain. You ask questions instead of offering answers. You seek understanding instead of validation. You listen not to reply, but to learn. You find joy in discovering new things, even if they challenge what you once believed. You embrace the mystery of life, the beautiful unknowing of it all. You let yourself be helped. You stop pretending to have it all together. You reach out, you receive, you allow others the gift of showing up for you. And in doing so, you create deeper bonds, relationships built on truth, not performance. You spend more time in nature, not to escape life, but to remember what life really is: the stillness of trees, the persistence of flowers, the rhythm of waves. These things remind you of your place in the vastness. They remind you that you are part of something much larger, something ancient and wise, and in that knowing, you find peace. You start forgiving yourself more quickly. For snapping, for forgetting, for being human. You no longer hold your mistakes like weapons against yourself. You hold them like teachers, firm but kind. You learn the lesson and you move on. No self-flagellation, no endless replaying, just growth, grace, and a quiet promise. Next time, I'll do better. You choose hope again and again, not because you're naive, but because you're brave, because you've seen what despair can do and you've chosen a different path. You believe in the possibility of good, in the resilience of the human spirit, in the quiet unfolding of better days. And that belief becomes your strength. You find beauty in the mundane, the morning light on the kitchen floor, the sound of laughter down the hall, the feel of warm socks on a cold day. These tiny things become your treasures. You don't need grand gestures to feel alive. You need presence. And you've mastered it. You stop seeking revenge and start seeking release. You no longer waste your energy crafting the perfect comeback or waiting for karma. You just walk away. You let go. You trust that what's meant for you will find you and what isn't will fall away. And that trust becomes your superpower. You begin to teach not from a pedestal, but from your path. You share your stories, your stumbles, your insights, not to impress, but to connect. You become a lighthouse, not a spotlight. You shine so others can find their way, not so they'll look at you. You live slower, but with more intensity. Every word, every bite, every touch means more. You are no longer chasing life. You are tasting it, savoring it, living it. And in all of this, you realize something powerful, that happiness was never hiding. It was never locked away in the future or buried in the past. It was always here, waiting in the present, waiting in your choices, waiting in your awareness, waiting in the space you made once you removed what no longer served you.